Right. So first of all, besides welcoming the panel members, I want to welcome anyone who's in the audience, and the great staff are here to enlighten us as usual. This is the October 12th session of the District Advisory Committee. The meeting is convening by Zoom and we are being recorded. So the first agenda item is action item is to, are there any corrections to the meeting summary? Seeing none, they are accepted as submitted. Thank you for that. Next, we're going to back and forth between script and there we go. Discussion item. So now it's time for John and company to come back. So SDC presentations, initial findings. Mike, you want to introduce them, or Heather or somebody?
Yep. Well, thank you. I'll introduce Heather, and I'll let Heather introduce the FCS team. But with us tonight to discuss these initial findings, we've got Heather Cook, our Planning and Development Director, and our team from FCS that's been working diligently behind the scenes. So Heather, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everybody. We are delighted to bring you the latest work on the methodology tonight. And I had included a memo in the packet so you could kind of have an introduction to what we'll be looking at tonight. But FCS is going to lead this presentation and bring you through sort of soup to nuts. And I will just preface it by saying that 40 minutes is a nice long agenda item. It isn't necessarily adequate to go into, the depths of the methodology. So we will cover their slide presentation. These are our experts, so they're going to be here for questions. And for anything that goes beyond the 40, if you still have questions remaining, that's okay. We're happy to have you send us those questions, and we can work on addressing those in kind of the most efficient way possible, so that everyone can benefit from us addressing those. So don't be too concerned if we have more questions at the end of tonight. And I think with that, I'd love John and Zach and Luke to just introduce themselves and take it away.
All right, I'll start. Thanks, Heather. I'm John Gillarducci, principal with FCS Group. Zach. Dang, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Oh, it's mechanical mute. Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Zach Hazel, senior analyst with the FCS Group.
And Luke.
I'm Luke Rawson, and I'm a financial analyst here also with FCS.
So Heather, I'm prepared to share my screen and start through. Does that work?
Let me know if you have any issues. Jessica's okay, good.
I think we're good, right?
Yes, we are good.
Okay, so thank you. We will start out by talking about the two different scenarios that we're going to show you, and then you'll see that they are both in a uniform approach. That is to say, no longer calculating individual charges for the different zones in the district boundaries. We'll then go into some background on system development charges, and then summarize the methodological approach and the calculation that we've taken to arrive at the two scenario initial results, and then talk about possible implementation steps. So the two scenarios are, number one, the district as it is today, which, as you know, includes the city of Milwaukee and the urban growth area. And the second scenario, we've tried to take a look in a very imperfect fashion at what the charge would be for the remaining district if the city of Milwaukee was no longer part of the district. Both of these scenarios do reflect that uniform charge approach. And this was a major question in our 2017-2018 work. We looked at the pluses and minuses of removing those geographic distinctions and approaching things uniformly. And it was a unanimous consensus that the district go forward and look at things uniformly as it pertains to system development charges. The main reason being it gives the district a lot more flexibility for spending money as it's needed throughout the district without having these artificial buckets, I guess you could say, holding funds in those geographic areas. So these are graphics demonstrating sort of on the left there what the current zonal approach looks like. You got service area 1 with Milwaukee and the urban growth area around Milwaukee, and then service areas 2 and 3 east and west of 205. The uniform approach, one SDC size would fit all, except of course in the no Milwaukee scenario. Some background about system development charges. These are the one-time fees paid upfront at the time of development by new development. In some cases, redevelopment is charged if they place additional demands on the system. But for the most part, this is growth paying for growth. We follow the law very closely. It provides SDCs, authority for SDCs for water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation, and most importantly, in our case, parks. So we calculate system development charges based on the cost of capital, basically, hard infrastructure, in this case, parks and parks amenities, and planned parks and parks amenities. So it's all about capital. We can't use them for operating costs, unfortunately. We can only spend the proceeds on capital. They do include a component which is a buy-in to any existing parks capacity, in this case, that might be available for growth. And they include also a future, and this is the more important, the bigger number component, which is all about planned projects in the service areas. So we look at what's on the way, and we try to isolate the growth related portion of that for inclusion in the SDC calculation. There are also, that final bullet is about, these are a share of major sort of system facilities, not local facilities. If we were talking about water, we'd say this is not the water meter, this is a share of the reservoir, a share of the treatment plant, and similarly for parks, it's about district system parks. I mentioned the law. It's in the ORS 223.297 through 316, and it gives us a really good rule book for what we have to consider when we calculate a system development charge, how the money can be spent, what the components of the list have to look like. And it's a protection basically for development, so that they can't be charged more than an equitable share for the costs of growth. This is a high level schematic of the math, which is pretty straightforward. That existing component, the buy-in to existing park facilities, is called the reimbursement fee. And to calculate a reimbursement fee, we try to isolate the cost or value of any unused capacity in the existing system that's available for future users, and we divide that by the growth that it will serve. That gives us a reimbursement fee. In the case of parks, it's almost always all about the improvement fee. That's the one that's looking forward at the project list, at planned projects. And if you picture that long list, we have to identify the piece of each project which is adding capacity for future users or growth. And the sum total of all those portions of projects and project costs divided by the growth that they will serve gives us our improvement fee. Together, they represent a share of capacity in the park system needed to meet the needs of that new piece of development. Some of it's already been built, and some of it is still to be built in the form of that project list. So this is a snapshot of the district's current system development charges. Zone 1, you see in the city, and then in the urban growth boundary, the charges differ pretty dramatically. And then in zones 2 and 3, all around in that $6,000 level. They vary by the type of dwelling unit, by the average occupancy for those dwelling unit types. And then the non-residential fee is applied depending on the type of business and the square footage of that business. You can determine what the likely number of employees is, and then you can calculate from that how much access they will have to parks in the district, and that's how that rate is applied. So now we'll talk about that, using that as a basis of comparison, what the newly calculated charges look like. And again, these are initial calculations. One of the things we have to do when we try to develop the two scenarios is go through and determine which parks will go with the city of Milwaukee and planned projects will go with the city of Milwaukee and which would stay with the district. So we think we've done that imperfectly in our first cut, and we know we'll need to go back and clean that up. But the other key inputs, we have the inventory of district parks, and we have a very good inventory of what the district already has. We use that to determine what the existing levels of service are for people who live within the district boundaries. We also have population estimates, both current and growth forecasts. We use that the denominator in the charge calculation is growth in population and employment. So we need that growth forecast in order to calculate the fees. Ultimately, we want to know what the past costs of the inventory were. That helps us calculate the reimbursement fee if there is to be one. And then finally, the last big piece is the SDC project list, all those planned projects and their estimated costs, and then the allocation of those costs to growth. That feeds into our methodology, which is the calculation, and then out of that come the rates, the SDC rates. Okay, so this first one is the district as it is right now. For that improvement fee, this is the sum total of all the projects on the list and their allocations to growth. So it's not the total project list, it's just the portion of the list which is growth related, about 55 million. We were also able to identify about 3.6 million in reimbursement fee eligible costs. So this is where the district, by our math, has a slight surplus in parks. That's available to be part of that sort of buy-in charge. So that's about 3.6 million. Compliance costs are the costs associated with studying SDCs every few years, accounting for the program and administering the program. You add those up over the planning period, and that's the 2.9 million. So the total cost basis, about 61.7 million. You see the growth in residential equivalents, that is population growth plus employee equivalents expressed as residential equivalents. So we know that an employee in the district can't use the parks as much as a full-time resident. So it's usually about 10 employees to equal one resident. So that's what residential equivalents are. They include employees expressed as residential equivalents. We've calculated the individual fees, which are simply the cost bases divided by that growth. So the resulting improvement fee, $2,273, the reimbursement fee, $150, and the compliance fee, $121. The total, $2,544 per residential equivalent. And then using the average occupancy statistics, we're able to convert those into charges per dwelling unit type, and then per employee, which will again be actually applied by square footage and business type. Those compare to the charges from a couple of pages ago, are about comparable to a couple of the district's current charges for single family residences, about double the charge for an employee for non-residential new development.
Do you want to wait for questions or do you want to get some questions as they come along? Because I know Dave has a hand up and I had a question too. Which would you prefer?
I'm happy to take them as we go if they're especially if they're based on getting a better understanding of the material as I go. Sorry, I didn't notice the hand up.
That's quite all right. So Dave, you want to ask a question?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I was wondering what year is this data based on? Is this back to the 2017 or 2018 data, or one of the reasons I ask is because we've had a lot of growth in our area. It's been affordable housing put in our area. It's added a lot of has added or will add a lot of people in the area. Thanks.
So the numbers were brought current to the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. That's one of the concerns that we have is a lot of the cost information has changed even since then, as we've seen inflation kind of go crazy. That is not reflected in the cost numbers. So, but we did try to bring everything up to date from the 2017-2018 study.
And then, thank you for that. Did I get your question, Dave? Okay, you want to put your hand down?
Yes.
Thanks. So my quick question is on this same page, when you have that reimbursement fee, which is, if I understand what you said, that's the equivalent of excess capacity over current need. I noticed in your explanation, it's based on math, not on perception, but what kinds of things would have contributed to that in our current reality? Just an example.
Okay, so and I've got Zach and Luke on. I'll rely on Zach if I say anything, if I make any mistakes here. But in general, so we calculate a level of service in acres per thousand. I'm going to simplify this after the project list has been constructed. So we're going to look first at, okay, once everything gets built on that project list, and how many acres per thousand is the district providing for its projected customer base at that time? And I think that's 22-ish acres per thousand, because it includes open space and other, many different types of parks. And then we look at what the current level of service is now, and how many acres of park you would need now to be meeting that level of that future level of service now. And that tells us if you have a surplus against that future level of service. Again, it's math, not perception, but it allows us to say, yeah, you've got some extra acres by this approach that you could ask for growth to buy into as it occurs between now and then, so that everybody's on par.
Okay.
So
and this is based on the whole one district, no zones, right?
That's right.
Okay,
and it's
good.
based on all the different park
Exactly.
types lumped together in an acreage total.
True. Yeah. So the 22 acres per thousand is throughout the whole district as opposed to the zone part. Okay, good.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so the no Milwaukee scenario, you'll notice that improvement fee basis has been reduced. And one of the things we know is that number should have come down more. So we are going to be, this number is going to change, but it's our initial cut, divided by growth in residential equivalents. That's changed as well, because now we're not including growth in that service area. The calculated fees are lower, but not a lot lower. We've got single family dwelling unit charge of $6,600 and an employee charge the same as the previous, or very close to the previous. Sorry.
Okay, there are a couple hands up. Missouri, go ahead.
The growth take into account anything like House Bill 2001 and any increase or potential increase in development of the unincorporated area?
In
I guess it's just, how is the increase in growth? I guess what metrics go into determining that? Are like political issues in terms of laws being passed to force the increase of density taking place? Is it just based upon the average number of people moving in the area? Yeah.
So that's a great question. It varies a lot. Ideally, what we want is internal consistency between the projects that are planned in the numerator and the amount of growth that those projects will serve. So if we had a fresh parks plan, it would say, okay, here's the anticipated growth, and here are the projects that will serve that growth. And we would know that the numerator and denominator were were consistent. So absent that, we'll fall back on, Portland State projections for growth, other sources of growth forecasts, and they probably don't reflect recent legislation that would intensify development and increase those growth, that growth. But the one caution I'll raise is if you were to try and incorporate that revised growth and let's plan for more robust growth, you would also want to make sure and revisit the project list to make sure that you had enough parks planned to serve that higher growth projection. So that's where in the SDC world, what's most important to us is that those two things match, whether you're, if you're underestimating growth, hopefully you're also underestimating the number of projects needed, if that makes sense. And there's a real problem when those two things are out of balance.
Okay, I guess maybe a more direct question is, are we, like, I was in the permitting office for the county recently, and how many people in my area I heard walk in considering developing their lots? Like, are we talking to the county themselves to say, hey, we've seen an influx of people getting a little curious about permits? Yeah, just, I'll go on mute now, but thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we have taken it to that level.
And I can just add, new Siri, because I think that's a really astute question. We don't do our own population projections. We rely on Metro as our regional partner. So they're going in and they're looking at, they actually do it because we don't have 2020 census data yet. We have to rely on the tools, the best tools we have. So they look at something called transportation analysis zones. And it does look to some degree at what the build out scenario would look like. Now, they can only project it based on what they know today. So they will use current information. And then again, like John said, the important thing is that these methodologies get updated like we're doing now, so they can reflect the latest zoning and then project into the future based on the best information we can have today.
Okay, thank you. Anita.
Yeah, this might be a foolish question. I might have missed something you said, but could you clarify for me? So this is all set up so that you can maintain the same kind of ratio of parkland to people and not necessarily improve it at all or raise it. You just want to maintain what we've already got going. Is that right?
Yes, and the one of the things that the law does is it precludes us from increasing the level of service. So let's say increasing that number of acres per thousand in the SDC on the backs of growth, I guess. So we can't ask growth to be building parks at a better ratio level of service wise than we're able to furnish to the existing population. The district would have a choice of raising the number of parks and acreage for everyone, and then they could charge growth for raising that level of service. But that comes with a huge price tag, and that's why it's made very difficult. I hope I answered your question.
Well, what do you mean by price tag? If you would just
So if let's say, and I'm gonna make up numbers here to illustrate my point. Let's say that the district aspired to get to 30 acres per thousand,
right,
in the planning period. Well, that SDC would go up, of course, and that's fine. But it would also mean that the district had to find another way to elevate that level of service for everyone in the district, and not just not just those folks who were newly developing, and that you couldn't include in the SDC. So that would take a funding source that unfortunately districts don't usually have, or a bond issue or something like that, to raise millions and millions and millions of dollars to elevate the level of service in the whole district boundary.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's sort of what I was thinking that you'd probably said in the past, but I
I
wanted to
didn't. That was
make
it was
sure.
great. I'm glad you brought it up.
Oh, okay,
I didn't mention
thank
it.
you.
And okay, Dave.
I just will follow on what she said, and that's, you know, the acres per thousand is not a very good indicator of the service you get. As you know, if you have a vacant ground, that's nothing. If you have a one with a community center on, that's a lot more expensive and it provides a lot more service. So, you know, I'm not sure. It sounds like you're just stuck with this because that's what the law is.
Well, the law actually doesn't get that specific, and I'm probably oversimplifying it a little bit. Many of the projects on the project list are developing out acres that the district already owns, but those count. Those are includable because you're turning basically an undeveloped park owned land into a park that's able to provide recreation and park for a lot more people. So those are includable, and they are included at the full cost of those projects. So I think that does get incorporated, those cost differences. You would see some pretty sizable projects on that list.
Great, thank you. Yes, Ryan. You're muted.
Yeah, John. So acres per thousand has been determined as an antiquated approach to looking at need. And that's by the NRPA about 7 years ago. Is there a different approach we can use to calculate that isn't acres per thousand, but is more, I know it's a tough one, but is there a different approach?
There, so yes, I am probably oversimplifying too. When it's trails, we use miles of trail, which I think what they would say is antiquated as well. But there are a number of different metrics that I'm aware of. There are probably others out there too. One of them is recreational value. And we've used that in city of Kent, Washington. We actually calculated an impact fee, same thing as an SDC. They call them impact fees up there. Based on the added recreational value of each of the projects on the list. It worked great. I know that acres per thousand is antiquated. We are I think cutting things a little more finely by counting undeveloped parks converted to developed parks as added acres, if you will, and so that makes them eligible. So I guess long story short, I don't think it hurts the district in this case that we are using that approach to determine the level of service. It actually works for the district because it allows greater eligibility of some of the projects on that list. But your point is well taken. There are other ways to do it. In that, you know, in the next district parks plan, that's where it would be addressed, is in the parks plan, because we have to use the data that's available to us.
So one quick question to add on to that is, are we looking at similar demographic, like size districts, and especially districts, not necessarily cities, because it's, you know, little different formulation. Are we looking at similar districts such as Bend Parks and Rec because Bend Park and Rec is a really close comparison for that acres per thousand, because I'm guessing our acres per thousand is really low compared to quite a few other districts. And is that something you could do? Because I think we could use Bend, and I think we could use I want to call it's Springfield.
Oh, Willamette.
Willamette, yes.
Yeah, Willamette. Yeah. We will. And yeah, we didn't do that for tonight, but we always provide comparable, data on comparable districts in your case. And I think we'd also want to put THPRD. I know they're probably bigger. Is that right?
Yeah, about 100 bigger.
Yeah, and we've got some good data on the Newburgh one, Chehalem too, as well. But Bend and Willamette are great comparables, and we can provide information on those.
And that could maybe bump us up to a higher percentage of acreage per thousand versus what we necessarily have. And I'm not sure what that number is, but.
Yep. As I warned you, John, several of us have a lot of questions, but I'm concerned about that we're eating up your time with the questions. So I'm going to start writing down questions that I can get in for later, unless I need it for right now to understand. And thank you all for those good questions. I appreciate the participation.
Okay.
You're on, John.
Thank you. So this is and it's a very high level summary of sort of how we get to the eligibility. One of the things you'll notice in both cases, at least by these initial cuts, using that acreage per thousand metric, we're able to find 100% eligibility on those projects that either add acreage or turn undeveloped acres into developed park acres, and close to 100 for trails projects. For the excluding Milwaukee scenario, those numbers change quite a bit because parks in and out of the service area make a big difference in the inventory and in the eligibility. At least that's the case for trails. So now, as far as implementation, we were going to show you here, I think it's important to look, had the district been increasing its SDCs with inflation since the last update, which I believe was maybe 15 years ago, those charges would be substantially higher, and almost in all cases even higher than the calculated uniform rate. In the excluding Milwaukee scenario, likewise, and you see again that initial calculation for the excluding Milwaukee scenario. So just a comparison against inflation that might be useful when it comes time for the board to consider adoption of a much higher rate. Here's a comparable, and we do have THPRD here. I don't think we've got Bend, but at a number of cities that are close by to give you an idea of what's being charged in the area. And that's it. If there are other questions, I'm happy to take them while we have time.
John, may I add one quick thing?
Sure.
Just to underscore those rates that you see. I don't know about the other jurisdictions, maybe but for the numbers that we're showing, again, it's you probably saw on the previous slides, it's the maximum allowable that the SDC methodology presents. One of the interesting things about the methodology is it tries to take the subjectivity out of the equation and give you sort of the maximum defensible. And many jurisdictions just adopt the maximum defensible, but it is a choice. And that's why the methodology is run, to sort of give you what is maximum defensible. Because if you go over that, you are not, I don't know, would you be out of compliance with the law or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it is a legal requirement that you can't go above that. So what you want to do is make sure your methodology is robust, and that's the reason why we have experts like the FCS team here, so we can make sure that when we present something, it's legally defensible, and then the decision makers can put it out for public comment, have a public hearing, get input, and make sure that their final decision is defensible as well.
And many of these are changing almost as we speak. Sherwood adopted a park STC close to $15,000, but it's not effective till January 1st. So we left the old one on there. Happy Valleys is discounted from the calculated maximum. And many of these others probably are as well. I think you might be muted,
You're
Grover.
muted, Grover.
There we go. I see a question from Anita.
Oh, I just remember you saying something like Willamine or something, which I don't know what that is and don't see it on the list.
Well, Willamine is a park district like NCPRD that covers Springfield and I think part of Eugene.
Oh, okay.
So it's a district that we'll add.
Okay, Missouri.
It's kind of a two-part question. Earlier on, there was the uniform policy recommendation in 2018. I'm kind of curious as to, well, I am curious as to what the stagnation in adopting that recommendation. But another question too is the higher SDC values. Is there any research or knowledge about, does that deter development, encourage development? What are the what are the hindrances of saying it's going to cost you twice as much now?
So the state is actually the state legislature has actually commissioned a study that's going on right now. We're part of the team that's looking at that issue. There's surprisingly little data that can show causation. In other words, there's data that shows that higher SDCs correlate with higher home values, but there's very little data on cause and effect. You know, you could also say that demand is already there, because one of the things that we see is, and you can see it here, some of the highest SDCs are in some of the fastest growing areas of highest housing demand in the state. And I can cite many examples of zero SDCs being charged and zero growth happening too. So there's, but I think the sense is that SDCs are one of the cost factors that play into the developer's calculation of what they are going to build. They need to make a return. And so in order to cover all their costs, they need to build a home of at a certain price point in order to make the return that they want. So I think that's how it can indirectly influence the type of housing that gets built and provided. But the data is pretty inconclusive. But yeah.
Okay, that would be interesting. Do you know the name of that? Like, I wonder if it compromises building material too. Like, instead of just keeping the cost the same, we'll just cut corners.
So the report will be out in December, and actually a draft is coming out in the next couple of weeks. It does look at sort of what are the developers' options when faced with a higher cost of building, and that's one of them. Do we build something of a lower quality? Do we build? There are all these different ways that they can respond, and those are described in the report to some extent. That was a part that particular section we didn't work on, but I know that content is there.
And that's a report that'll be out, and it will have a digital access point.
Yes.
Could we
Yes.
Have that made available for those of us who are interested?
I will find out how to get that to you. Yeah, I don't know what the release rules are or anything like that, but yeah.
Looks like Heather has a comment.
Too many screens. I can't find my unmute. Musiri, to address the first part of your question with the 2018, why wasn't that adopted? It's because at the time, Happy Valley was in the process of withdrawing from the district. And they were, when we started the study, they were out, and then they got pulled back in based on a state decision. And so we were in limbo at that time. So didn't have a certain basis to adopt a methodology. And then by the time it was all resolved, our data was out of date. So I know we've talked about this as a DAC in the past, provided that information, but with you being newer to the group, I just want to make sure that you have that information.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any more questions on the STC conversation? Thank you very much, John and company. It was very helpful, and someday I'll know more about it. I still have some questions, but those are me in the weeds.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Great.
Good night. Michael,
you're up.
Just to finish off that conversation about SDCs, I know it was made mention in the memo, but with the city of Milwaukee future uncertain at this point, this is another project that we're going to be needing to put on the shelf until it's resolved, because the next steps in the process would be you all looking at one set of data, not both sets, in one scenario, making a recommendation to the NCPRD board to consider as a methodology, which then opens up a 90, Heather, you can correct me, I believe the 90-day public comment window, and then the board would have to adopt. We can't do any of that while the city of Milwaukee stuff is still in question. What we hope is that there will be some resolution, not years, months, a few months, let's see, similar to what we're doing with the Milwaukee Bay Park project of putting the 90-day pause on it. Put a pause on this. Hopefully the data won't be too out of date, but what we would do is we would re-engage with FCS at the time and make that determination if there needs to be some revisions to the data and changes made before we kind of came back to you and started where we're at right now. So I just wanted to round that out so that everybody understood kind of the process from here until something else is figured out.
Great, thanks. All righty, so that takes care of SECs. Now it's budget request form. Who's leading that?
That would be me. We just, and in your packet, we gave you the budget 101 slides. We're going to present those next month, but we wanted to get them to you early, and we're going to give them in the packet next month as well. But and for folks like Maureen and Anita, for anybody that's not new, it's very similar, just with updated numbers to what we did last year, but we felt it would be a good refresher and would be a good introduction for our new members as well to the budget process. So that's why you see it in the packet, but we're not doing a budget 101 presentation. But that led into what we will be talking about next month in the budget 101 process is our budget calendar. And we've identified in our budget calendar what we think are reasonable touch points for the DAC, especially in the initial budget creation. And so we want to highlight those with you. One of the things that came out of those discussions with staff is this budget request form. This is not a CIP project request form. We like this form, which is live on our website now, to be open to the DAC, but really any member of the district that would like to propose something for us to consider to put into next year's budget. So most of these things we're guessing are going to be along the capital repair and replace level. But we don't want to, limit anybody's imagination. We're going to plan on taking them as you see, if you've looked at the form at all. If not, I recommend you go and take a look. You fill it out online, you submit it online, and it comes to us internally. We're going to be reviewing each one for both financial feasibility. Is it something that could be added in as a capital repair, or does it need to be referred to put on a future capital improvement project list? But it's just, we're trying to just have another way to engage with both you all and the citizenry as we start developing next year's fiscal year budget. For reminding everybody, it goes quick. It goes so quick. Once the process starts, there's deadlines that start hitting. And so once it gets to the point where we've submitted, which is, I have to look at the calendar, but sometime like in early February or maybe early March, it's done. It's out of our hands and it's now into the county's hands. So we've got some time to do some brainstorming. If you all have specific ideas, again, the capital repair and replace, I would refer you to our budget and the review that we did last month on what those kinds of projects are. And then it's a really simple, easy to use form. So we hope everybody enjoys it. Please, if you haven't looked at it yet, take a look at it. If anybody has any questions, hopefully I can answer them.
I have a question about this. Is this the type of thing? I know I saw some members that are in sub area 3 talking about accessibility at our local parks and being frustrated about some improvements that were happening that didn't include making the park more accessible. Is this the type of thing that they could use that form for, to request a specific type of funding for a certain type of equipment that might be useful, or is that go into something else?
That's really more into the capital improvement level. And I know which part you're talking about.
Yes.
I can speak about that very briefly, because there's a big difference. First, there's a difference between inclusive park design and accessible park design. And then there's a big difference between a playground replacement and equipment within the playground replacement. And we had limited funds to be putting together in last year's capital repair and replace budget. And we had this piece of park equipment at Alma Myra that it's rotting. It's wood base is rotting in the ground. There are all kinds of details about size of fall zones and types of surfacings and all that. But really, the best option that we had is to just replace that piece of equipment. What we wanted to do was at least engage the community in the area in a few choices of equipment, but we didn't probably make it clear enough that it wasn't a full park redesign. We fully anticipate that all of our parks are going to be on a CIP list in some way, shape, or form for complete rehab and a full community engagement of, not just looking at the area that's there and working within that constrained space. But with the dollars available, that's what we had. With that said, though, based on some of the feedback, we have gone back to our playground manufacturer, and they're looking at some options that can make it more accessible. It won't be inclusive by any means. And again, we'll I'm sure at some point do some classes on the difference between. But for instance, and I think one of them was taking out one of the satellite elements and putting in one of the accessible merry-go-rounds that are open. Everybody can use them, but especially folks with limited physical abilities can also use them. So that it's always great to have that feedback, but it is disappointing to the community. I know they want the full thing, and we did not have the resources right now. We fully plan that that's going to be a project in the future.
Okay, Anita.
I don't want to take up a lot of time, but could you just say what park this is so I won't be mystified?
Yeah, it was Alma Myra Park. It was the
right. Okay.
Project that we had for the $60,000 to replace the rotting equipment.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So that's all I had on the budget request form. Or Grover, sorry, did you?
No, that's great. I'll just follow right along with that. Because since we mentioned the Altamira, I can do it now, or I can wait until we come under the changes and status updates. But I would like us to be able to talk about the health and welfare of our parks, particularly that one having to do with using poison sprays and how it kills the microbes and the fungi in the soil. So sometime between now and the end of item 3 on our agenda, I'd like to be able to at least have some conversation about that, because I don't know where we stand as far as that, but there's no question the damage the spraying is doing to to the environment in the soil.
Well, those are some fairly blanket statements, Grover, and
Yep.
without necessarily, the better mechanism would have been to ask what our standards are and what standards we follow in the application of herbicides, pesticides, and any other weed control or other pest control mechanisms.
Well,
We have
I
a very
appreciate,
well-established plan that
Yeah,
follows
okay.
best practice guidelines.
Okay, good. So Missouri, you go ahead.
Is there, it kind of seems like we have like the DAC, then we have like the budget committee. Is there a way to kind of couple these a little bit better in terms of maybe there's a shared meeting,
Well,
we can exchange
I
information?
am not sure where any of this is on our agenda, folks. We are far
It's a
afield.
question. It's a question. That's all it is.
We're right in the middle of our discussion items of an agenda. We're just off track. I'm just bringing it forward, Chair.
Okay, good. Well, I'd actually like to clarify that we're on the section that talks about budget request form, and we did a little preview of what will be coming next time. So if you want to move that question to next time, they can, but it certainly does fit. And you did mention that the budget's out of our hands at a certain date. So all of that was in the things that were discussed. And so thank you for that question, Missouri. I'm fine having that go till next time, but I'd like to then have that be put on the agenda when we do go to Budget 101, that we're going to actually talk about what our method is and whether it is the most effective.
Well, and remember, right now we're already ramping up into budget season. I know, Grover, you've talked to me about your ideas of change to our budget committee
Right.
that we have. Any change that we would put in place, I would not recommend that we try and put into place while we're in the midst of the beginning of a budget season.
I concur.
Consideration.
I concur.
Ask staff internally to reach out to Wes to find out, how they do things and what their model is. I do think it's something that, yes, we could probably speak with a bit more understanding at November's meeting when we talk about budget and present, options as we see them.
Thanks. And thank you, Missouri, for bringing it up, and thanks for Mike for taking it and running with it. So yeah, so we can talk about that in November, and I would appreciate if you talk to Wes, because they did change their format and they're a district advisory committee as well. So cool. So that's the adopt the budget section. And now the budget request. Now it's time for the adopt a park and trails program.
Yes, and I'm not sure if Thelma's on tonight. I haven't looked and seen. Does not look like it. But I know that if she hasn't already, she's going to be contacted to be invited as one of our first folks to sign up. But you can all jump on that right now. We just gave you a short introduction in your packet with a couple of screenshots. But the site is live now of the new Adopt a Park, Adopt a Trail program. It's a bit more streamlined. I'm hoping easier to use, easier to report hours, more clear on what we're expecting of folks that adopt either one of the parks. And the way it works is it's a drop-down menu. You can pick which park you'd like to adopt. And then we have, I believe it's 7 or 8 segments of the trolley trail. And people can apply to adopt individual segments. Super easy to apply, super easy to report. We tried to make it nice and user-friendly. So I invite you all to go and explore. If you've got a group that would be interested in adopting one of the parks, please fill out the form and we'll get the process started for you.
Great, thanks. And as far as Thelma, I did get a communication from her, and I had sent her that link and asked her if she'd seen it yet. And she said she's glad to see it. And she assumes, since I sent it to her, that it's available for her to share. And from what you just said, it sounds like that's true. So I'll let her know. Cooper. Okay. Any other questions about the Adopt the Park? Yes, Anita.
Well, right now there's the Friends of Riverville Park, which is fairly informal. Can you allow or feel comfortable with a friends group that doesn't do the Adopt a Park official stance, but still works with the natural area specialists to do park volunteer events?
Oh yeah. I mean, Adopt a Park is pretty specific. I mean, now,
Yeah.
any group, any friends group could adopt any park they wanted. It's open to any kind of family, organization, group. Really, we ask for one main contact person, and then each individual volunteer that's within that group, whether they're a minor, there's a separate form, or over 18, there's another form. But basically, each one of them fills out the form, and you can do that. With that said, just because you're not adopting a particular park doesn't mean that you can't go do volunteer work at any individual park. So, but that's usually, like you said, under the coordination of one of our natural resource people or another rehab type of program.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments about the Adopt a Park? Oh yes, Ryan.
Stupid buttons. So no, I guess it's just commentary from my and I'll put down my hand here if I can figure it out. I just wanted to recognize, I know how difficult having so many programs and managing so many programs can be, especially like the friends group program, Adopt a Park program. And it may seem, I think sometimes like maybe the district's not doing a lot, but I just want to commend the staff on the fact that you're doing a lot for what staff we have. And I just want to put out just a little bit of appreciation to y'all. And yeah, this is great. I love the Adopt a Park. It's another step forward. Believe it or not, it takes a lot of time for staff to manage, and a lot, because I managed starting with 3 friends groups to 15 in 2 years, and it took up like 30 hours a week plus 30 hours of other work in my previous position. So it may not seem like a lot, but it is a lot. And I just want to commend staff on y'all are continuing to strive to move forward. So I think maybe I speak for a lot of us here on thank you for that.
Right.
Your comments are appreciated, and I will pass that on to the real heroes that are doing the actual work. I appreciate that. There is a lot of work that goes into all of this.
Yeah, that's not for you, Mike. That's for the.
No, I totally.
I tease.
Pass that on. No, I will. Staff likes hearing that kind of feedback. Thanks.
And I told Heather, because she and I were the only ones on in the beginning, well, and Jessica, sorry, that truly I appreciate. And when we get to the monthly reports, how much of that kind of taking what was discussed and getting it built into detail, and appreciate the work and appreciate the hearing and responding. Cool. Any other comments about the Adopt a Park part? Okay, now we're on changes to status updates and ongoing projects.
Yeah, and the ongoing projects, really what we've done is we incorporated, as you're requested, putting the CIP updates on the monthly report from Planning and Development. And so that's going to be really a better eye towards those ongoing things. If you like that format, let us know. If you'd like to see something different, let us know. But that is a change as requested.
Thank you.
I don't really have any other stuff to report on Milwaukee Bay Park other than what was covered. If you had not seen the notifications or heard previously, I think it was covered before, that we are putting that on a 90-day pause. We're not canceling the project or anything like that. We were just pausing it to see what happens with the city of Milwaukee in the next, if something is resolved in the next 90 days. If not, we'll obviously reevaluate and look again. Ryan, did you have a question on that?
Go ahead.
No, I just had a question. I'll wait till the end here, this piece. I just wanted to have a comment about something I heard earlier. So.
Okay. Concord, I don't have any specific updates other than that OPSIS and all of its subs have been working both on the library project and finalizing plans on those, and also on the infrastructure repair projects at Concord. In fact, I'm reviewing documents right now for some amendments, but as numbers are coming in, they're looking good right now. We hope to have more information at next month's meeting, something more concrete. But things are starting to come together on that one, and it sounds like things are trucking along on the library side. SDC methodology, we already covered that. NCPRD funding, we kind of already covered that with future budget discussions next month, which also includes now our system plan and CIP timeline. I can say that we are making progress forward in our staffing within our planning and development division. Heather has brought on Alex, a principal planner that's going to be working, Heather, if I get this wrong, correct me, on short-term projects and including maybe some capital improvement stuff, level of analysis work. She comes to us from Metro Local Share. So right now she's been doing a local share analysis that we'll be putting out here probably again, maybe at next month, maybe not until December, but she brings a lot of expertise there. Can we announce anything officially, Heather, or no?
We're so close, but not yet.
So close, not yet. All right.
We're so close.
We're very close on another recruitment for the other full-time principal planner. We also have a couple of other key positions in the pipeline right now. The deputy director position is open right now. That's a deputy director for administration. It's a new position replacing, not that we can replace Elizabeth Gomez, but Elizabeth Gomez, our finance service manager, is retiring at the end of November. I've retooled the position into a deputy director of administration position. It's currently in, I think, week 2 of recruitment. We'll also be having our recreation program manager position, which is one of the subdivisions of the recreation division, and a management position will be going out hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And then there's been a few other things. So, there has been some progress. That all of that is what I talk about when I say building capacity. We're building our capacity to be able to move a lot of this stuff that we want to and need to, and acknowledge that's out there to do to get it moving forward. So very positive stuff on that. That's all I've got for, I guess, under the overall changes or status updates.
Okay, I have a quick comment on that, then I'd like to hear from Katie, and then I have a different comment. So thank you, Mike, and thank you for what I'm hearing in all those things you just said. You are giving us some, this is where we are, and this is what we can expect. Not like in the minutest of details, but at least keeps us in the loop. And I very much appreciate your willingness to broaden that information sharing, because I know you guys got tons to do, and I'm looking forward to having be more staff, so you won't have to keep being 2 or 3 people. Having lived that life in a different life myself. Katie.
I just want to clarify for myself, is Alex the long range planner that we've been hoping for? No.
No,
Okay.
that's the one that's super close, and
Okay.
I hope
So
that
hopefully next meeting. Okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Oops. Okie doke. Yes, Ryan.
Every time I do this, the little screen pops away and I have to figure out. Okay, so Mike, just a thought. I know there's going to be questions about glyphosate and triclopyr and all those wonderful things coming up. Is it possible to do we have an integrated pest management plan? We obviously we do. And maybe even share that with the group, or is it possible to, I know in a past life, we had to put it online for people because it was just such a explosive thing. And just maybe talking about where that glyphosate tool is on the list, and what, just I think that'll answer a lot of questions for the group. That's just a thought.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly where my head was when this discussion started tonight. I'm just getting up to speed on what our integrated pest management plan is and what it, where it's drawing its resources from. I just had staff do a really nice summary for me that kind of lays things out and where we're in compliance and how we handle things like glyphosate use and stuff like that. I'm going to work with Kevin Kaysen to see how we can just get that into your all's hands so that at least you have a frame of reference of what our plan is and what standards we're following and who they're from.
And not to be like detail oriented. One little strategy that really helped this like community understand was the use of glyphosate, triclopyr, all 2,4 whatever the T
Right.
Compared to the average homeowner. In our agency, we actually ended up, this is Lake Oswego,
Right.
we used 1 gallon compared to a homeowner that was using like 5 gallons.
Right.
And just like being able to, if we can be able to talk about that and see where we can improve. That's it.
Yeah. We'll take a look at what they produced for me. That was nice and clear. We'll add some more flair in there for you, Ryan, and
Love
and get
flair.
that into your hands.
And a little drama, please. Just a little drama.
Just a little. Okay. But yeah, when I read that, it was a really clear, very simple and understand what our strategy is. So
Great. Because when that correspondence came in from one of our, are they patrons? Anyway, residents, there we go. One of our residents and the concern, I did a lot of searching and I couldn't find ours online. And I very much would like it to be online so it can be part of a bigger discussion and to kind of, I don't want to say defend, but to clarify what I said a bit ago, there is no, from all the research I've done, there is no question. So there is question about it's carcinogenic and so on and so forth. So I'm not even going there, but there's no question to what it does in the soil and what it does to the insects and what it does to the bees and the butterflies and just how soil is supposed to be, as opposed to how farming has evolved into a factory issue, as opposed to nature doing what nature does. That's the part I know there are a lot of people who care about that. And so seeing what we have so we can address it.
We'll get that sent to you. That'll hopefully clarify most stuff. And then we can discuss as an agenda item in a future meeting.
Please, and thank you. Okay, doke. And then I had one more thing that I wanted to comment on. When I read through here, I want to give first of all a kudo, and then I want to do a survey. And so for all of you who are on the DAC, in a minute I'm going to ask you if you knew about this before I talk to you in one way or another. But thank you, NCPRD. You sent out a piece today. I can't find it, but in the bottom of it, it talks about the Metro Measure 26225, which will be on our ballot. That has to be turned in 3 weeks and 6 days from now at the latest. And it is for the Parks and Nature funding going forward, which is where a lot of our money comes from. Not a major source, but it's a big source. The question is, how many of you know that was going to be on our ballot and what are we doing? So thank you for getting that out. But I'm just really, if we miss that, that's going to make a huge difference. We don't get people to know the difference it'll make for us here in Clackamas County and everywhere else. I'm not campaigning for, but people need to know what's available and what it means if they don't do it.
We have to be very careful of that, of not campaigning.
I know.
We're a government entity and we put out information about things, but not whether we are in favor or against. So that will continue to be our stance. I'm glad that you appreciated seeing that. But yeah, we're going to be very limited in how we can put out information. Doesn't mean that you can't be out talking to your folks and talking about it. But yeah, I get itchy on ballot stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other part I want to clarify is knowing that there's an opportunity to renew what we're already currently contributing but it's going to expire, and this allows it without no additional dollar out of the pocket. It allows it to extend for 5 more years, correct?
Again, this is not an NCPRD initiative at all.
It certainly does add a lot to NCPRD's mission. That's all I'm saying.
I understand that, but I'm not going to or prepared to speak about somebody else's initiative and what it is or is not. There will be benefit if it passes or does not pass, I'm sure. But I'm not prepared to speak on it.
Okay. Well, as a point of reference, $4.5 million in the current NCPRD available funds to spend came from the existing one in 2019. And so that's that. And 5.5 million went to Clackamas County, not NCPRD. And then City of Milwaukee got $1 million and change as well. That's all come out of the existing. And if that doesn't renew, then that won't be happening again. How's that? Did I advocate or just point facts? Anyway, next item. Yes, Ben, I see your hand. We're going to see you?
Oh, well, no, I'm on my phone today, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, is this the, Grover, can you clarify, is this Metro initiative for how they spend the nature and neighborhoods funding?
Not how, whether it is renewed.
Right.
Is the question.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because I know there's a big, they're getting prepared to do this, a more democratic process. I don't know if you all are familiar with Metro's Nature and Neighborhoods grant program, but they're going to be doing more of a democratic process for how funding gets spent, whether it's through parks or other jurisdictions. So I wasn't sure if you were talking about that or whatnot, but if that's something that there's a question about, Alex, who's also new at NCPRD, maybe could help clarify some of that and what opportunities there might be for the district. That's all I got.
Okay, great, thanks. And no, I wasn't aware they were changing that format. I was already referring to the continuation of the funds to be distributed. So,
Oh, okay.
thank you, and thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for letting us know that. Okay, any more questions about changes in statuses and updates, etc.? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item. One of my favorites, public comments. So Jessica, do we have people, how many people do we have in our Zoom audience?
It looks like there's 3 members of the public and a handful of staff.
Okay, 3. So do any of, I'm not saying staff can't speak. Do any of the people in the audience wish to speak? Would you please raise your hand so somebody who besides me can see that you wanted to speak?
Jan Carruthers has her hand raised.
Well, I think we should let her speak.
Of course. Thank you very much. And it's really great to hear all the progress moving on. But I do have a question, and that is a status, if you can give us any status about dealings with the city of Milwaukee and what their plans are.
No, I can't give you any status at this point.
Okay, could you give us a projection on when, because you said we're putting things on hold for 90 days and then maybe not, and the whole SDC process will be on hold as well.
The 90-day number was just a number. It wasn't based on any projected finish or resolution. It's within the next 90 days. We'll reevaluate as it gets closer to that end and see if we need to extend it on. But again, I cannot and I will not give any update to stuff that has legal implications to the district.
Okay, thanks. Carry on, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other? Paul Savas says, good meeting, everyone. I have another meeting to attend and will be departing soon. Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Appreciate your participation at all times. Okay. Speaking of which, no, that's off topic. Okay, no more on public comment. Moving right along. DAC member reports. Yes, Anita.
Seem to be a regular when it comes to this.
We
But
love it.
I just want to say that last month I mentioned that in sub-area 2, there's a problem of late night noise and some small fires and cars racing uphill from River Villa Park. And I talked with Officer Sarah McClurg, who deals with this kind of thing. And she reported at the Oak Grove CPO meeting that there's a lot of auto theft and burglary going on these days in our area. And clearly those are high priority crimes, and late night noisy activity at a park is in a different category of public nuisance. But she said any resident anywhere can call the non-emergency number for the sheriff and ask for increased patrolling of a particular area. And when the time is right, certain people who live near that park are open to finding out whether NCPRD is considering automatic nighttime gate closure at the park. And on the bright side, yesterday I went to a celebration at the site where the Gladstone Library will be built. And the reason I'm mentioning it at our DAC meeting is that I want to give a shout out to the 2 firms that have designed the Gladstone Library, because they're the same firms that are designing the amenities at the Concord project. And the way nature and imaginative public art and a rotating display of teen art will be integrated into the Gladstone Library, I think bodes really well for the projects at Concord. I'm definitely jazzed about the Gladstone design. And I also think the design there reflects a lot of input from a very active Gladstone Library task force. This is just my initial impression, but it may be that this new library shows a great deal of public engagement, and public engagement was the focus of our last DAC meeting. So I hope it's something we can emulate throughout the Parks District. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's next? No? Okay. I'll fill in for a moment. I did want to speak to, from the members' perspective, this was a 92-page, 95-page packet, which, you know, all of my stuff is printed on one side and something that was printed for something else on the other side. So I don't mind printing that, and it's got a laser jet and all that. I mean, whatever. But I know that I've heard from a number of people that it is not convenient to print it. And I'm wondering if we could do like my stint on the library board. We, for those who want it, can have it. If we were all meeting in person, we'd get a copy when we walked in the door. So if those who would like to get a printed copy, it should be ready more than likely the Thursday prior to our Wednesday meeting. I'm wondering if those who want it could pick it up at the Aquatic Center, if they're going to be there anyway, or have it mailed. And I just like to suggest that as an option, because for me, actually seeing it, not just reading on a screen, adds a lot. So that's my first piece, and Mike wants to comment.
I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees.
Oh, good.
I see what I understand what you're talking about, Grover. I would hate to be printing multiple copies of a 90-page plus packet. The costs are quite enormous when you start adding it up month by month and number by number. With that said, I would be interested to know who would be interested in a hard printed copy, because again, we are trying to be green. We are trying to lower our carbon footprint. We are trying to do all of these things. And, you know, I would not presume, I did not plan it once we get to a point where we're meeting in person, that we are printing out packets. Again, we send out packets and people bring laptops or tablets to work off of, or print them off on their own, or again, individual requests. But it is very, very, very expensive. And what winds up happening is we wind up making choices of what not to include in the packet to save costs when we're having to print those hard copies for everyone. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm just my initial thoughts on that. If it were just a couple of people, probably not a big deal, and we could figure that out. If everybody wanted a printed copy, I'd have to actually go and talk to Elizabeth about, our printer cost contracts with our machines and whatnot. So I'm not opposed, but I would be interested to know. Grover raised his hand. Is there anybody else that would be interested in regularly having a printed packet prior to the meeting?
I actually want to address, if people are adequately able to use online and fully read the material and be able to be prepared to respond to stuff, that's fine. I'm an old guy and I print and I write notes on there, and that's how I do it. I could read it online, that's true, but I just want to be clear where I'm coming from, and my request was only for those who are interested. But I've had conversations with a number of DAC members that it's difficult for them to read through it all, et cetera, and I was just echoing that. So I do request that, but we'll leave it up to others to speak up. I'm fine standing alone.
And no need to put anybody on the spot right now. If anybody else would like printed copies, just email Jessica and put in the request. Again,
Okay,
I don't think it needs to be a big deal unless we're doing it regularly for everybody, and we keep having big packets. Then it starts getting a little costly. Again, not something we can't necessarily bear, but.
Thanks. Yes, Katie.
Well, first of all, I do not want a printed packet, so please no. But I had a question. I don't know if this should go on an agenda or if you can speak to it, but I know in the packet it talked about how staffing for the aquatic centers impacted offerings, and I'm wondering if there's been any changes to that or if that's something we should talk about at a later date. I'm just wondering about how staffing for these rec staff is impacting those services right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, after having just come back from our National Recreation and Park Association National Conference, it's everywhere. It is not just us. It is a national shortage. Even my past city in Fairbanks, we have 3 indoor pools. They had to close 2 of them because they only had enough staff to staff one of them. I think they're finally getting where a second pool is opened up. Here, it's the same issues, and there's no good solutions. We can't, as a government entity, we can't just have like signing bonuses like private corporations can do to bring in 15-year-old lifeguards. So with that said, what I can say is internally, Candy and I, Candy Ho is our recreation and aquatics and sports director. She and I are already starting to talk about some of the stuff that both of us heard at NRPA this year regarding ways to think about different ways to build schedules that maybe doesn't require as much part-time staff and utilize or seasonal staff and utilizes more full-time staff, or come up with another level where it's X number of hours to get somebody benefits. Maybe that's a driver. So we're going to try and research and look at a few different solutions. But the nice thing is it's not just people don't want to work for NCPRD pool. It's national. Every pool is struggling right now.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, Ryan.
Okay, I just want to say something about that real quick, Michael. The one thing I've been thinking about a lot with this is it's switching to trying to do everything because we have such limited staff. I mean, we're dealing with the same thing. We're dealing with quiet quitting, all this great stuff. It's like, I think it's as a district picking what we do excellent and not do everything mediocre. Not that saying we're doing it mediocre, but that's a shift that really needs to occur in most agencies because they're just asking so much of everybody to do everything. And there's literal burnout there. That's why we see, Katie, that quiet quitting. Have you heard of it? It's like, so maybe figuring out what we do excellent, with the
Yeah.
staff we have. Yeah.
Well, and that's part of what our focus on, especially as we bring on a program manager that'll help kind of round out our management staff. But it's to me, one of the core values of the pool is not the wave pool. It's not the cool water slides. It's not the kiddie area. It's the number of swim lessons that we teach and give life-saving, swimming skills in an area surrounded by rivers. It's the jobs that we're introducing, 15 and 16-year-olds into, and giving them the good job ethics that they take on, either working as Parks and Rec professionals, if they continue on that way through their careers, a lot do, or wherever they go. I much prefer them having that be a good first experience, and we provide that. So I see I know where you're at, and those are those kind of conversations that we're trying to have. We do a lot of stuff really well. The only reason we can't issue or do more swim lessons is because we don't have enough staff, and quite honestly, we're starting to get limited by amount of deck space and classes within the time frames that people are willing to come for classes to offer. But staffing certainly is a challenge, and all estimates and guesstimates or projections are saying that it's not going to ease up anytime soon. So that's why we're trying to look at, okay, are there different, better ways we can do it, instead of continuing to have just open recruitments where nobody's applying, or these silent quittings, quiet leavings, whatever you call it. Yeah, we've got to think of things differently.
Great, thanks. So the other thing I wanted to speak to is that, because I did get from and then comments from others about that concern about spraying, I'd like to know, do we do soil testing as part of NCPRD, as far as exploring the health of the actual soil in our parks?
I'll include that in the report that we send you all.
Okay, okay, good, thanks. All right, that was done for me. Anyone else on DAC member reports? Okie doke. Next item is the district monthly reports. Again, I appreciate all that's gone into them. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
So,
and we're running out of time, so I just want to highlight a couple of things. Hopefully you've read through word and memorized line by line, but just to summarize, again, just to highlight, thank you, Heather and staff, to including the CIP list on an ongoing basis in her report. We are getting ready very soon. I don't think we've launched it yet, but within days, I think, or at least within the next week or so, this Pocket Talk campaign that was alluded to in our marketing and communications. What that is an overall campaign using translation devices as a way to break down barriers to recreation participation. So these are handheld translation devices called Pocket Talks, and we'll be launching a full marketing blowout campaign with window graphics outside facilities and full press, but it'll allow people in 82 different languages to converse with us on a near conversation level, and be able to convert text in those 82 different languages to and from as well. So we hope it's a really positive, it's going to be a really positive tool. This is kind of coming out of our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee and the efforts that they've had in the last year of figuring out different barriers. We had heard about these devices, and we've been beta testing them for the last several months, and are now getting ready for launching out to the public. So we're happy about that. I love little facts, and if you looked in the parks report, we've now, as part of our capital repair and replacement, put out over 1,000 cubic yards of playground surfacing, the engineered wood fiber surfacing. So over 1,000 cubic yards, that's a lot of surfacing. So thanks to them, it looks great. I love the smell when it's just been blown in. It's a great fresh wood smell. And then just wanted to direct you and remind you, November 20th is Milwaukee Community Center's Thanksgiving dinner. And that information is at the end of your packet as well. So I won't do any more, but if you haven't seen that, scroll all the way down to the bottom. But we've got a lot of great things in the queue. We've got a lot of great things going on right now. And if anybody has any questions about the report, I would be happy to entertain those.
Okay, bye, Ryan. I do have a couple of things
See
that
you,
I
Ryan.
wanted to talk about or ask questions about. So first of all, I noticed on, so kudos, first of all, I'll start with the kudos. Thank you, Heather, for putting the planning for the priorities and community engagement process for the metro sharing. Looking forward to that. My question is at how far will it be developed before we have a chance to have any input to it? And it's not unrelated to the conversation that we had when you were at the Jennings Lodge CPO meeting about community participation. It's like, do you wait until it's all formed and then you take it out to the public? Or, because like there were estimates in some of these charts that talk about what it's going to cost for certain things using the Jennings Lodge park at the park at Jennings Lodge. So it has a specific number as an estimate. Okay, well then that must have some parameters of what's likely to go in there. It's not set in stone. It doesn't, but like it's going to be about this much. So then you all know more things than we know what the community wants on the one hand, and or what the parameters with the site using or using these schools, it's their property. How soon? I'm not hidden. I'm very much having early community participation from the get-go, and I think we'll get an improved product going forward, working in partnership with the community engagement model that's the county's putting a lot of money in to roll out. So that's a long way of saying, but I wanted to, on both parts, know more about the community engagement for the metro sharing and also things like the Jennings Lodge. Do we have to wait until we got a plan and we got somebody figured out what our rollout's going to be, or do we actually have community meetings?
Well, nobody can prevent any CPO or anybody from having community meetings, Grover. But Jennings Lodge is a project that's in our CIP. It's identified that we're going to be spending money this year to scope it out. And it's a district-wide project. It is a district project. I'm not saying it's a district-wide amenity, but it is a district project. So we're going to do a district outreach. If the CPO wants to have their own outreach and provide, data information on what their desires are, that goes into the pot along with other stakeholder meetings, other community-wide meetings that everybody within the district is available and invited to come to. And the CPO is another stakeholder. We covered this. I can't be any clearer that that's the way we've got to do our public engagement.
I know you and I talked about it. I wanted them to hear about it. That's all, because I don't concur with a lot of what you had to say about that. So I wanted this group, the DAC, who I'm speaking to now, to know about that and hear a response about how we're doing it. So you're doing it instead of Heather, but the point was you're saying that it is it's called a neighborhood park. It's a district asset. So I could see that for a regional park. I can see that for, but
I don't know how to expound more on what I'm saying. It's a district.
Good.
It's a district asset. There needs to be district-wide involvement. We can't say that we're doing equitable and diverse and inclusive outreach to people if we're only taking into account people that live within a quarter mile of a particular property. It's irresponsible for us to do so. We will take that into consideration. The CPOs, again, I've never said that their input is not going to be taken as part of us as a stakeholder in the property. But no, I can't see any argument that would say that the surrounding area, whether it's a CPO or any other neighborhood group, would be able to drive and make the decisions on what is ultimately a district asset.
Good. I'm glad you clarified that, because that's exactly the part I would like to clarify. I did not in any of my speaking suggest that it would be only or be driven by or make decisions by. Those are all things that have been added separate from what I said. I want to get it going to generate interest, to generate ideas, not a decision one, to talk about what interests are. Not, people are not going to, who live, Dave is not going to have a lot of concern about driving 6, 7, 8 miles over to a neighborhood park that is what, 50 feet by 150 feet. He can have all the input he wants, but the point is, this has been a long overdue park since the 1970s. I want to be clear, but I never said, please, we'll go back and listen to the tape. I never said only, decision-making, none of those things. Include all the people you want, but you can start with the people who are closest.
And I understand that, but it's going to be a staff-driven effort. It's going to be driven by our staff. It's public dollars that we're spending on a project that was approved to the budget.
Yes, so we get to that when it actually gets to making decisions. I'm clear about that. I am not talking about decision-making. And the whole issue around community involvement is a very different conversation than this ultimate decision-making. If we'll go back and quote right out of Gary Schmidt's letter, the first thing is to find out what the priorities are. That's all. We haven't even done that yet.
Why we put money to the Jennings Lodge project to do exactly that. But
Good.
staff is going to do that. I'm not going to take a CPO telling me this.
I know, Mike, nobody said about a CPO telling you, please do not misquote that. I will be defending with you. No CPO is going to take over. And that's what you keep speaking to. But what I want to speak to is on this chart that we have, this community improvement project chart, it specifically puts the Jennings Lodge and the Justice property into not the 22-23 fiscal year. It puts it in the 23-24 fiscal year, and not a word was said about that. So I'm concerned.
That is absolutely untrue, Grover. We have explained very clearly that typically our CIP process is we put money into the first year for concept and design, initial scoping. We put money into the second year for actual design and construction documents. And the third year is construction. That has not changed. So
let me read you what it says here, Mike. It says
project.
It says this is a preparation of scope of work, and the due date is December of 2023. All that you just said, that's totally agreeable. I'm not disagreeing with that. But what this says is the preparation for scope of work time frame is December of 2023, which puts it in the 23-24 fiscal year, which is not the one last year where it was in, not the one we're in now, but the next one. That's all I want to say.
Can I clarify?
Ahead,
I interpreted that as December 23rd, not December 2023. So now
Okay.
I'm wondering if I was misinterpreting that, and I think Heather's going to speak on that.
Yes,
Let's
please
ask
do,
the person who put that together.
Okay, my error. It is not December 23rd. It's meant to be December 22. It's an error I didn't even know until right now. So Grover, thank you for pointing that out. That is an error on my part. Sorry about
And
that.
on Justice property also?
I need to look in front of me.
Because both of them are listed as December of 2023. And I think in the future we ought to put 2020, because above it says 22-23. I took it as being 2023, which.
And I took it as the day of the month. So
Okay.
There we go.
And the number was actually supposed to have been 22. So we've got that cleared up.
Yeah.
For both of them?
Yes. Yep.
Well, and again, these are estimates. These are based on if things move along and staff is hired and all pieces fall into play. I love the comment. We had specific numbers for our estimates. No, we have numbers for our estimates. We don't have specific numbers, then that wouldn't be an estimate. Things change in all of these regularly based on what we can get done.
Okay. And then I want to point out then that the TBD for New Urban is
Yes.
Another question of, so that it somehow doesn't follow. Is there a likelihood it can make it into the 22-23? And it also is Current activity is none, that's all it says.
It just depends. Right now, the big difference between New Urban and the others is we don't have an existing IGA with them right now.
I understand.
So I'm meeting with the school district. When is that, Heather? Next week or the in the next few weeks? We've got a meeting set up with the school district because we have to actually get an IGA created for that. So
okay,
yeah, that's why it's a little bit further out. But again, we're planning on making as much progress as we can on each of those things identified. It's just going to depend on how things progress. So,
Missouri, you had a comment?
Yes. So just to go back to the community input, I'm going to rephrase it. So hopefully it resonates in a different way, Michael. I know it's not like whenever we say things or I say things, or trying to attack, right? I know you have the best interests of the parks and the people in mind. So it's not to be confrontational. It's just an open question. So now going back to community involvement, it's how so if NCPRD is doing community outreach over the district, how do we, and those of us who are doing community outreach, or want to start doing community outreach locally in the area, how do we kind of sync the minds, right? Because we don't want, we've done our research and now you have a bunch of information and now we have to go back and do that. So there's time waste on everyone's end, right? No. So that's why we just want to be involved in some way. That's
no, and I get that. And that's what Heather and I think it was just yesterday, we're talking about exactly that, of trying to make sure that we're going to have our outreach methods through our Facebook and press releases and advertising and all of that. And we recognize that the DAC wants to have a similar window to be able to do their own outreach within their own sub areas. And so what we're trying to do is come up with a way when we're coming out with our engagement schedule or our engagement calendar, we're identifying by date, like from this date to this date is when NCPRD is going to be engaged in our surveys and public meetings and whatnot. And we ask that the DAC, if any individual DAC representative is wanting to do outreach in his, her, or their own sub area, to do so during those times. We can't mandate what format any of you use, but we would ask that you try and bring back the same kinds of information that we're doing, which is essentially a SWOT analysis.
Yeah. If you're using a certain form,
what are weaknesses? What are some opportunities? What are the threats? So that way we can then take your input and the stuff that we've gotten from the public meetings and any survey that might be, and put it all into one complete packet. But to your point of trying to coordinate, trying to have those date ranges into place and some sort of a not standardized format, but guidelines on the kind of information that we're trying to get. Or if it's a very specific topic, what are specific talking points that we're trying to find out about on any particular thing? Because this is what we're trying to set it up right to be able to replicate it with ease every time we've got one of these public information or public engagement efforts. Some of that effort is going to be helped through our staff that are coming on within planning and whatnot. But we obviously can't keep waiting for staff to engage on some of these things. So that's why we're already talking about how we can make that work. And if any of you have any suggestions on ways that you could see that would work seamlessly or as seamlessly as possible, please let us know, because Heather and I were just literally talking about that yesterday.
Absolutely. Like, so if you guys have some sort of plan draft, giving that to us so we can say, oh yeah, we're thinking about organizing a meeting there. Maybe you guys have media you're advertising for this or handing out, syncing of media, forums. It's just being involved early on so we can all benefit the community. That's the ultimate goal. It's not to butt heads. It's to drive this forward.
It's fundamental. Absolutely. It's the source of the start of the information, I think, that Grover was asking about, that we just don't have good answers. So specifically for Metro Local Share, when we go out for our first engagement, we're going to be taking a list that internally we've taken from past CIP lists of all the different kinds of projects that were put on there and putting them through a Metro Local Share filter to see which ones actually meet that eligibility. So instead of in the Metro Local Share realm, going out and having public meetings to start with to say, what should we have? We're starting with a list of the stuff that had already been identified. we're culling that down to what might be eligible, and then having room, wiggle room, if there are a couple of other projects that maybe aren't on anybody's radar, to be able to put through that filter. And so it's you know, we have to have some of our expertise in the front end of it to make the process as smooth as possible. Doesn't not with the effort of precluding anybody's individual input or new ideas that we haven't considered, but just as a starting point to have that conversation. Heather, you can just nod your head. Did I summarize that well enough of what we've been talking about? Okay.
That's
Yeah,
great.
and I think I would just add the one simple thing that you know, part of the time commitment up front is really making sure we have that community engagement plan so that we don't move far ahead and leave people behind. Community engagement is imperfect. It's always evolving. And we are trying really hard to keep up and do our best. And I think one of the big things we can do to set things right at the beginning of the project is really make that community engagement plan really strong. And one of the things that we're, yes.
And public, good.
Yes, yes.
That was the other part that I was going to say, Siri, what you're explaining or what you're describing really is our community engagement plan.
Yes.
What our outcome is, what our purpose is, who our audience is, any specific targeted stakeholders, other mechanisms, even the verbiage on, you know, press releases and all of that, you know, included, so that it kind of has our main talking points. And in there would be the engagement schedule that I was talking about, that would say, okay, our engagement is going to be from April 1st to May 30th. We asked the DAC to have any feedback from their individual, you know, sub areas by, you know, the third week in May or something like that. And here's the format that we're using, you know, XYZ PDQ.
Or if we go canvassing and you guys have a media outlet or media format you're handing out, maybe we hand out the same thing. So now we're on the same page. We're not handing out different pamphlets. Yeah.
Yep. Melina, for those of you who have not met her, she is amazing, and we have a great graphic design team that is great at putting all of that stuff together. And really, it's just adding a couple of other things, like maybe a talking points page, you know, onto what we're already putting out to media outlets and other, you know, neighborhood groups and everybody that's on our list shares, etc. So it really is trying to integrate how we enhance each other's activities and get results that are usable.
Yeah, we're here to help. Use this as a benefit to help do work for you, you know, like, yeah.
Cool. All righty. Well, thank you all for the input on that. And I appreciate any more comments on the district monthly report. Except I want to one more say, I really appreciate the breadth that is being added to it on a regular basis, and look forward to more of that. So thanks. All right, see no hands on that. I think it's time for that magic moment where we talk about what's next. So our next agenda submission is no later than Wednesday, October 19th. That's a week from today, and at 5 p.m. And our next agenda setting meeting is going to be on October 26th. And the DAC meeting is going to be on November 9th. And our planned agenda topics include park-wide smoking ban, the 2023-24 budget prep. And I do have a question. I noticed that we're going to be getting quarterly budget updates to the DAC in some materials I was reading from earlier today. Is that going to be built into this or come after that? Or do we know when that's going to be put in? Because a budget prep is different than the current year budget.
Yeah, well, I mean, we give you quarterly budget updates.
Okay, cool.
Our budget, the next quarter ends in December. So we won't, you've already gotten your first quarter of the new fiscal year. So the second quarter,
July, August, September, and we're on October 12th. We already got our
September, October. Yeah, so July, August, September, October, November, December.
Correct.
And
And
you've already
today's
seen the first quarter budget financial report.
the actuals. This is our first
Yeah.
meeting since the quarter's been over. I'm confused.
Pretty sure. I may be mistaken. If not, then it would be at next month's meeting.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Because January, July, August, and September, and we're on October 12th.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay, yeah, you're right.
okay, good. So there'll be quarter
Oh,
one.
The last report we gave you was the unaudited end of year financials.
Correct.
That's right.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So next
Quarter
month
one of
should be
22,
first
23.
quarter financials and the budget prep.
Super. And then we were also going to talk about, I've already forgotten what it was, but we were going to slide over. Oh, between now and then, we should have the updates on some idea of the, what do they call it? That fancy word. About the plan, integrated pest
Yeah.
management plan. Okay, good.
Yep. We'll get something to you before the next meeting.
Okay, and the part about soil testing. All right, thanks. Any other comments for the good of the order? It's 21 after. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Have a good night.